Real Madrid and Juventus are two of the most storied clubs in the world, and they boast a long list of iconic figures who represented both the Spanish and Italian giants. You can start that list with Zinedine Zidane, who won titles as player for both clubs and guided Real Madrid to 3 UCL titles as manager. Now, Cristiano Ronaldo, he also starred for both clubs, winning a pair of Serie A titles during his 4 seasons at Juve after a trophy-filled 9 seasons at Real Madrid, where he won 4 UCL titles. Now, Ronaldo wasn't the first Ballon d'Or winner to jump between clubs. Fabio Cannavaro spent 2 seasons in Turin before joining Real Madrid after captaining Italy to the 2006 World Cup title. And another player who enjoyed title-winning success for both clubs is Gonzalo Higuain. The Argentine striker helped Real Madrid win 3 La Liga titles in his 7 seasons there before winning Serie A titles in all 3 seasons in Turin. And on the managerial side, Carlo Ancelotti is more known for his 2 successful stints in charge of Real Madrid, but the Italian legend's first high-profile managerial job was guiding Juve from 1999 to 2001. Now, today will be the 22nd meeting. Tomorrow will be the 22nd meeting between Real Madrid and Juventus. Real Madrid lead the matchup, but Juventus lead the group stage meetings. The last time that they met was in the Champions League quarterfinals back in 2017-2018, where Real Madrid won 4-3 on aggregate. Now it all goes down. Champions League matchup between these two tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern on Paramount Plus, with coverage starting at 2 p.m. And there is one man who knows this matchup very, very well and who will actually be on the call tomorrow. So let's bring in our CBS Sports commentator, Clive Tyldesley. Clive, you're going to be on the call tomorrow, and you've had the chance to be on several calls between these historic clubs. What are some of the most memorable moments for you?
Well, the first Champions League final that I ever called on network television in 1998 was Juventus versus Real Madrid. Can you see this piece of paper? It's 27 years old.
Oh my God.
Can you see some of the names on there?
Whoa.
Deschamps, David, Zidane, Inzaghi, Del Piero, and that was the losing team. They met again in the 2017 final in Cardiff, and look at that Real Madrid team which won. This guy, number 7, you may have heard of him, Cristiano Ronaldo. Surprise, surprise. He was the player of the match that night. But probably the most dramatic game that I've called between the two was the following year. Real won 3-0 in Turin in the first leg of a quarterfinal. Game over? No. Juve managed to square it up, went 3-up themselves at the Bernabeu, and it was left to CR7 to score a stoppage time penalty to decide it. And the funny thing about it is that the referee on duty that night was an Englishman, somebody I knew, Michael Oliver. When I got to the airport the following morning to fly home, I saw this guy with his collar up and a pair of dark glasses on, and I thought, I'm sure I know him. It was Michael. Listen, it was a good decision, but Gigi Buffon didn't think so. He started berating the referee into his face, and so Michael sent him off before the penalty was taken. Juve had to bring on Wojciech Szczesny to face the penalty, but they could have had Szczesny and Buffon in goal for the penalty. CR7 would still have scored.
I think, Clive, just listening to your voice just takes me back to some of the most iconic moments I think that we just witnessed through childhood and everything else. So just congratulations on your career. But I'm going to ask you a different question, something that we didn't have in the production. Looking at all of those legends that have played for both of those two clubs, who's your favourite? Who's your standout player that you've enjoyed watching from a commentary box?
Zinedine Zidane is arguably my favourite player of all time. I mean, it's not often that commentators, well, Ray Hudson does it all the time, actually stand up during the course of a game. A player actually gets you off your seat, but Zidane could do that. The only regret, really, is that the last act of his wonderful career, I was sitting in the best seat in the house in Berlin for a World Cup final, and I didn't see it. The butt which brought about the red card, which saw him disappear down the tunnel forever, happened about 15 meters from where my gaze was looking at the game itself. So I couldn't work out until we saw the replay why my favorite player was being sent off in a World Cup final. But on balance, big a Zidane fan as I am, I think he probably deserved it.
I think that's safe, Clive. Looking at these two teams kind of historically with all the success both have had and kind of how they're viewed maybe similarly around the world, what is your kind of view of these two clubs and the history and everything else that comes together for this match?
Well, Juventus have won 2 of their last 10 Champions League games. They haven't really threatened to win this competition since they were in that final in Cardiff with Real Madrid 8 years ago. They haven't finished in the top 2 in Serie A in the last 2 seasons, and they're struggling again. So I think realistically, you have to look at the task that they face tomorrow night. Even though Real Madrid are going to be missing 1 or 2 of their key players, I think, through injury. And of course, they've got a arguably bigger game on their plates against Barcelona next weekend. I mean, they could probably afford to lose against Juve and still progress in the Champions League, but they want to try to preserve their 2-point lead at the top of La Liga. It is a wonderful matchup. Historically, it means an awful lot. 2 of the greatest names in club football on our continent. But I think that Real Madrid go into it as a strong favourite tomorrow.
Clive, when I look at some of the notable players from the past, I see one notable player who unfortunately is listed as doubtful in Dean Howson. His connection to Juventus is strong. For Juventus, how did he slip through the cracks? Because he's a sensational talent and he's really young.
Yeah, but we weren't really aware of his talent until probably about 18 months ago. I think if you'd said 2 years ago that he would be a Real Madrid starter when he just arrived at Bournemouth in the English Premier League, then people would have started to look at you a little strangely. His progress over that period has been rapid. I still think he's a little raw at the very highest level. He's just nursing a minor injury. Real Madrid have problems at centre-back because Antonio Rudiger will definitely miss the game. David Alaba has now also been ruled out of the match. So it may well be that Raul Asensio will have to come in alongside Eder Militao. They could play Tchouaméni there, of course, but they've already got problem at right back. They may have to play Fede Valverde at right back for another game. Both Carvajal and Alexander-Arnold have trained today. But again, I think they'll have one eye on El Clasico at the weekend, and it wouldn't surprise me if both of those sit out the game tomorrow. So, Howson is still developing, I think, as a full-blown Champions League player. And I dare say that if Rudiger and Militao were both fit, that he might actually be learning his trade from the bench rather than in the starting 11.
And it's interesting, as I criticize Juve for selling him, they did get some decent money. I think it was like $16 million for Howson for the initial transfer and a cool 6 from the 50. So my bad, good business.
Well, their finances are under UEFA investigation again, which is a concern. But all of the media that you'll have seen as you've woken up this morning in Italy is about Igor Tudor. That there is a story now that I hate talking about coaches in this way. I know too many coaches to be talking about their futures behind their back. I don't know Igor, but the story in Italy is that basically he's got 6 games to turn it around. Otherwise, Juve will be looking for another coach.
Talking about managers or head coaches, as they call themselves now, I want to focus on the man in the opposite dugout. What do you make of what Alonso has done, especially Xabi Alonso, the history that he came with, obviously playing for the club and then what he achieved, of course, in Germany? How do you make of his start as the Real Madrid manager?
Well, one of the dilemmas that I have when I'm commentating for CBS Paramount Plus is whether to call the man or woman on the sideline the manager or the coach. As you know very well, here in the UK, we tend to talk about the manager. And I think a lot of managers think of themselves essentially as coaches. But Carlo Ancelotti was a manager. He was a man manager. And that really was the task, and has been the task, I think, for whoever's been in charge of Real Madrid for quite some time, just to try to bang all those heads together and try to convince them that there's no I in team, because there's some pretty big names, pretty big talents, and therefore some pretty big egos in that dressing room. And Xabi Alonso still has the man management issues. We've seen that already with the way that he's trying to handle Vinicius Jr. through a difficult period in his career, and handle Rodrigo at the same time. Kylian Mbappé doesn't need any handling at the moment. He is absolutely flying. But what Xabi Alonso has tried to do is perhaps introduce a slightly different emphasis, a different style through his coaching and nous and ability. And that's brought about a very different Real Madrid. And whether they can sustain it over the period of the number of games that they have to play, and they played deep into last summer. Most of these players will hope to be playing in the World Cup finals in the States next year. It will be interesting to see. But I think that he's definitely put his stamp on Real Madrid, both in terms of the way that he's handling the individuals, and Vinicius Jr. had another very hot Sunday, and indeed in the way that he's shaping the team up to play in a slightly different style to the way that Carlito did.
Clive, you spoke about the way that Alonso has been handling Vinicius Jr. I want to know how you handle Vini Jr. as a commentator, how you prep your notes for him. We've seen how detailed you get, but are you prepping really for anything for him? Like maybe the fact that maybe he'll provoke another 2 red cards in any other upcoming matches?
Well, they're not the only 2 that he's provoked already this season. I think that it's very difficult to make any kind of judgments about somebody who has clearly had to endure abuse of a level that no human being, let alone a footballer, should ever have to face. And, without taking this to a level over and beyond the football conversation, I've never experienced racial abuse, so I can never really know what it feels like to go through what he has been through in the last 2 years. To complicate his young life, and he is a young man, even further, it seems as if all kinds of financial carrots have been dangled in front of him for him to go to the Middle East. I would think prematurely, given what he's still got to give the game. And then he's had to handle everything else that happens around being a Real Madrid player. But he seems to be dividing opinions in a way in Spain at the moment, which is making life, if anything, a little bit more difficult for him. Whether there is a senior player in that dressing room who can put an arm around him and maybe in a fatherly way ask him whether he needs quite as much grief as he's attracting at the moment, would be an interesting thing. I mean, I'll throw it back at you guys, because elite dressing rooms better than I do. The role of the senior professional, the role of Danny Carvajal, for instance, in that dressing room, just to try to bring some perspective to the madness of being a Real Madrid player, might actually be the most important voice in the life of somebody like Vinicius Jr. at the moment. Is that true, do you think?
I would definitely reflect. So sometimes the stars or the leaders of a changing room, especially when you're so ego-driven, isn't necessarily the big name. Most of the times it isn't the big name. It's the person who understands the standards and also creates the cohesion. And I think Danny Carvajal, who you alluded to, is probably the reason as to why he keeps getting those extensions, because he sets the tone correctly in the changing room and also balances everything right.
I'd also say the change in Kylian Mbappé. We saw the difference in their relationship last season, where it almost felt like tit for tat. It almost felt like they were wrestling to see who's going to be the big dog. There was a match earlier in the season, and I forgot who it was against, where Vini Jr. had to come off the bench, and there was this clear visceral reaction towards Xabi Alonso, towards the sideline, where he gets a goal, and he's pointing, mouthing off, and Mbappé goes and does this, puts an arm around him, and says, "Come on, mate, let's go." And so those 2 players, I think, have really emerged as leaders in the dressing room for Madrid.
Yeah, there's been a big turnover of senior figures. It's not just that Modric and Kroos have left. You think somebody like Nacho, who's been around forever. And Carlo himself, as I say, I think was the ultimate, in inverted commas, player, manager. I'm sure that Xabi Alonso has got other things that he wants to be concentrating on, other than trying to parent Vinicius Jr. through this rather turbulent period in his career. But, I mean, the bottom line with all of these things is that you need to be producing. And at the moment, we are in a reverse situation that you've just alluded to a year ago, where Mbappé, by his own admission, was struggling to find his form and was actually prepared to say so. I think confront that. And I think that he has now not only found his form, but he's found the joy in his football again. I'd love to see Vinicius Jr. smiling on a football field. And maybe it's difficult, given everything that's happening. And last Sunday didn't help in that sense. But I'd love to see him enjoying his football again. And I'm not absolutely certain that he is at the moment.
Well, Clive, we appreciate all the insight as Real Madrid get ready to take on Juventus. It all goes down tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. Clive will be on the call, so you'll be able to hear his voice.